Scott here, representing Youth Potential. Now today I'm going to be speaking about why people would want to self-harm. I've done a video like this before and you'll see it on my channel. It's called Why Does My Child Cut? Now the reason I've done a new video is because I want to make a much clearer and shorter definition. And obviously since 3 years ago when I made that video, I've learned a lot more. I understand a lot more now. And I don't just want it to be for parents understanding why their child cuts, because you might be a friend of someone who's self-harming, or the teacher of someone who's self-harming, or a colleague. You know, there's more than just a relation of a parent and child. So to start with, there's a couple of factors that go into why people would want to self-harm, and the first one is an early life trauma. Now, this doesn't happen with everybody, but there are plenty of people out there that self-harm that have suffered a really traumatic event early in life, perhaps as quite a young child. Now, for myself, when my parents were divorced, I was about 7 years old. I didn't think any of it at the time. It didn't overly bother me too much, but by the time I reached the age of about 15, that was when it really come flooding out of me. That's when obviously my emotions had been bottled up subconsciously over those 8 years, and it just released out. And that's when I started suffering with depression, and when I started actually hurting myself. So these things can happen. You know, you have this experience as a child, a young child. You don't take anything in because as a child, your mind doesn't understand a lot of these things, and you just carry on as normal. And then when you get older, you start understanding more. Your emotions become more complex, and your consciousness becomes a lot more aware of things. That's when it starts affecting you. You deep down into your memories, you know, sometimes voluntary, sometimes involuntary, and it all comes back flooding. So yes, an early life trauma could be one serious reason why someone is self-harming. Another thing to consider is current and ongoing events. Now, some people don't have that early life trauma. Some people have things that are going on today, for example, that are just ongoing. It's maybe something's been going on for a little while, and that is what's making them want to self-harm. Now, there are so many things, and I don't even have I can't sit here and just list all of these things up for you. But there's obviously some really common ones, like bullying. That has sent plenty of people in self-harming. There's stress with exams and coursework, GCSEs, all that kind of thing. There's also poor relationships at home, poor relationships with friends, and just poor relationships with boyfriends and girlfriends, partners, etc. These are things to consider, but they're just some of the common examples. Now, if you're wanting to know why that your loved one, your friend, or whatever is self-harming, I recommend that you should be talking to them about it, but don't pressurize them into giving you an answer. That is such an important thing. Anyone who feels pressurized into explaining themselves gets really defensive, and it could send them the other way. They could possibly want to self-harm more, so you've got to take that into consideration. But anyway, sorry about that, the memory on my camera ran out there. So current ongoing events is one of the other major factors as to why someone would be self-harming. So something else I want to speak about now is triggers. I don't know if you've heard of triggers. It's quite a common phrase that's thrown around in the world of people that self-harm. So what triggers are basically is, I'll give you an example. Someone who suffers with depression and is self-harming, they see something and it reminds them of why they're depressed, for example, or it reminds them of that early life trauma that they may have experienced, and it influences them. It unlocks something in their mind that just makes them feel so low again that they want to self-harm. That is basically what a trigger is. Now, a trigger could be anywhere, anything between, say for example, that they've just come out of a relationship and that ended badly. They walk around and they see lots of couples holding hands in public. That could trigger the urge to self-harm. They could be watching a film, for example, and something happens in that film which happened to them in real life, and it was a traumatic experience for them, and that makes them want to self-harm. Triggers could literally just come at any time, out of anywhere, when you're least expecting it, and pretty much impossible to avoid. Okay, you can't protect yourself from triggers. Obviously, there are things that you can protect yourself from, like for example, if you're someone that is self-harming and you decide to watch a film knowing fully well that it's got some really sad, depressing dialogue in it, well, things that you associate with sad and depressing, for example, staying away from that is obviously going to help you avoid a trigger. But at the same time, when you're out in the real world, there are loads of things that you can't stop. So, triggers. I really hope that this video has been quite informative for you. It's been quite difficult. I've done so many takes trying to get this into one video. But if you do have any questions, please leave some comments below and I'll be more than happy to answer them. Anyway, stay safe, look after yourself. Bye.